That's already pretty strong considering it's a research quarter. I want to talk about the biggest bonus that the Greeks get. Hey everybody, I'm Pacific the Casual Gamer. Welcome back to another video on Humankind tips, tricks, tutorials, opinions on the game. If you like these videos that I make, subscribe and hit the bell and all the, the buttons. So let's jump into it. Now, I've been reading Reddit and looking at YouTube videos, and I noticed that a lot of people kind of seem to just be focusing on ancient cultures in Humankind, which is great because ancient cultures will literally affect you for the rest of the game. I noticed that after the ancient era, the Greeks are in there, and I think the Greeks are actually a lot stronger than they seem on paper. So I decided I was going to talk about that today. And I mean, literally everything makes them special, and it combines in this weird concoction of science that helps you out in a lot of ways. So the only thing that I really think doesn't benefit you, except maybe long-term if you want to go for science, is their bonus, which is that researchers just get more science. I mean, it's good. It's whatever. It's just another science bonus. It can help you, obviously the more people you have, the more research you have. It's just a basic upgrade. I don't really think it impacts that much until, you're starting to have like 20, 30, 40 researchers. Then that's an extra 80 science right there if you had 40 people. But what I really like about the Greeks is their hoplites, right? I think this is actually, of the rest of their bonuses, the kind of like the next weakest one, but I think it's strong. The hoplites are in a unique position because in the classical era of Humankind, there is no spearman upgrade. So if you have spearman units, you're stuck with them until you research war summons in the medieval age and get pikemen. And that can put you at a disadvantage because for some reason the AI in this game really likes to use cavalry. I don't know why. So I find myself ending up building more spearmen anyways, but then they're kind of useless in the next age, and then the AI wants to go to war with you, and then, they don't have cavalry anymore, they have swordsmen, so it kind of sucks. You play this game of like building some spearmen and some swordsmen later on, or warriors, and then just kind of bouncing back and forth between them. The Greeks, you got hoplites. They're really strong. If you place them in the right way, they can be strong like pikemen. I'm pretty sure they can be as strong as pikemen if you have enough of them. And it's nice because you don't need iron for the hoplites. At least on the build that I'm playing, you don't need iron, which can be a pain in the ass to get if you're playing on a smaller map. Now, their bonus building, I'm just gonna call it the amphitheater. I don't even know. It's the Amphitheotron thingy. It looks like an amphitheater, like Socrates would be there speaking, okay? It's a fucking amphitheater. Now, just placing it as it is, it gets 3 science per era, 2 cultures. So the base science on it is 6 with 2 influence. That's already pretty strong considering it's a research quarter, but if you arrange your districts in the right way, you can get a massive bonus because it gets 2 science per every adjacent district, right? So it's not adjacent research quarters, it's adjacent districts. So if you think ahead a little bit, in the ancient age and the early classical age, you're not sitting there being like, okay, I'm gonna put all my farmers' quarters here, my industrial quarters there. No, how do you build your districts in the ancient and classical age? You go, I need food. Where is the most food that I can get from putting down a district? Boom, I'm gonna put it there. Now, if you arrange your districts in a kind of like a hexagon, but you leave the middle empty, if you can actually pull that off, which, I mean, building that many districts is possible in a city. If you do that, you can put an amphitheater right in the middle of it. That is going to give you 12 more science. If you don't pull that off, that's okay. But basically, think of it as building an amphitheater gives you the equivalent of 2 to 4 research quarters, which is really nice because in the classical era, I find that I don't have a lot of resources to dedicate towards building more research quarters. I really don't, because I'm like sitting here trying to build up my industry. Maybe I'm going to war with someone. Maybe I need more money to fund the army. If you got a lot of hoplites, you're gonna need money, so you gotta focus on money. So having to build less research quarters in the early game is really nice. It's even more nice if you decide your ancient culture is gonna be the Zhao or the Babylonians, because it's just gonna stack. Basically, my whole train of thought here is maybe you stack it with the Zhao or the Babylonians, and then you do the Greek amphitheaters. You can stack up enough science to where maybe when you reach the medieval age, you don't spend resources on research quarters. But we'll get into that later because I want to talk about the biggest bonus that the Greeks get, which is what every science civ gets. You get Foresight. Now, why is it so important in the medieval age? Well, it's because in the ancient age, you're kind of just warring over stuff. I feel like there's no real ancient age wars, but in the classical age, that is when wars start to happen. Now, you already got your hoplites, which means you're already set up to upgrade them to pikemen, and you can get crossbowmen with war summons. This is one of the first techs you get in the medieval era, and you can research that technology with the Greeks. And if you're producing all of the science because of your amphitheaters, it's not going to be a pain in the ass to get war summons. Now, what else you can do with the Greeks, because you have Foresight, right? And I wouldn't recommend doing this strategy like doing like a Babylonians and then step up, you know, just keep them for 10% fame, same with the Zhao. I would do a combo with the Greeks specifically because the amphitheater helps with this. But then what you can do is you can research a bunch of techs in a row that upgrade your science production. You get theology, which increases your city cap, which is in the medieval age, which is great if you're going to war, right? City cap's great. Then you can get another tech that gives you manuscript altar, which is also in theology. And then you can get alchemy, which gives you 10% more science, which is probably worth more than a research quarter, and it's not going to give you a stability freaking just trash out because you're building research. No, it's 10% science. You don't get stability. What do you call it? You don't get a stability penalty for building an alchemist workshop. So if you combine amphitheater, Greek science bonus, and maybe the Zhao or the Babylons, or even if you don't, you're going to be able to start researching texts in the medieval era as if you were in the medieval era building research quarters. So what I would do in this situation with this strategy is, I mean, there's two options, right? You can age up or you can stay in the classical era. If you age up, I would highly recommend still focusing on science. At this point with the Greeks, if you're going this route, you know, you go through, you get the Alch Lab, you get the manuscript altar, you're already kind of setting yourself up to produce a crap ton of science. And you can kind of use it to maybe pivot to doing something with agrarian civs, you know, research a bunch of agrarian stuff, or maybe influence. But I feel like once you start that research train, it's better to just keep it going, because you're just going to get all this technology, and it's going to, you know, there's a point where you build so many research quarters that you just can stop, and then you can start using all this tech that you researched. Maybe you can employ a strategy where you pick the Umayyads or go into the medieval age as the Greeks and immediately start getting gunpowder units, because with the amount of science that you're going to be producing with the Greeks, you're going to start destroying the medieval tech tree. The medieval tech tree will not stand a chance against amphitheaters, okay? It just doesn't. So if you keep doing that, you keep focusing on science, you're going to be able to start getting your gunpowder units early on in the early medieval age. You start producing more money, more influence. Just keep going with that. I feel like the pivot from science production to something else should not happen with the Greeks. It should happen after you pick the Umayyads or go with the Greeks and start researching all the early modern technologies, because those are the technologies I feel there's like a line in this game, right? There's a line in Humankind that separates kind of like early modern industrial contemporary with medieval classical and ancient. Once you cross that line, then you can pivot, especially because the Mughals, right? You got the Mughals in the early, like, you can't skip out on the Mughals. So that's what I would do if you're going for the tech tree where, you know, you pick the Greeks, then you go and you start researching early modern tech in the medieval era. Now, the other strategy, which is my favorite strategy to do, because I kind of like playing this game a little slower, I feel like Humankind's a little too fast, is you are the Greeks, but you actually stay in the classical era, and you use the medieval technology to get as many classical era stars as possible. Now, a little pro tip here, if you notice, let's say I haven't gotten any stars, right? There's 3 stars to everything. Let's use the combat, for example. So if you notice, the stars, they get more valuable as you level up, specifically by 100. So let's look at the research star, for example. Anytime you are in an era, so let's say we're in the classical era, and you don't have a research star, the first one's worth 100. If you're the Greeks, because you're science-based, it's worth a little bit more. But baseline, it's 100. The next one is 200. The next one is 300, okay? So if you do the math in your head, right? 300 plus 200 plus 100 means 600 fame. That's worth 6 stars, right? Just 6 normal stars, but you only did 3 stars. So what a good strategy to do is use the classical era, but you use all your medieval technology, and you just focus on war growing, focus on gaining every single freaking star in the classical era. And that's going to kind of give you insurance for the later eras, right? If you have that early on in the game, you don't have to worry later on about tailoring your strategy to something specific because, oh, my civilization's set up to produce a bunch of science. I have to keep doing this, or else this guy that's ahead of me is going to win the game. So if you get all of those classical era stars, if you stay in the classical era, you don't have to worry about the medieval era, because probably by the time you get all the classical era stars, or at least most of them, you could probably skip out on a couple of them, but by the time you get done with them, you're probably going to have all the medieval technology. So you'll be able to quickly recover that time you lost in the classical era by just doing everything in the medieval era and then launching yourself into the early modern era. After that, you know, like I said before, I like kind of keeping a strategy up till the early modern era. That's when I really like to make the pivot to whatever else I want to do. But, you know, just keeping on that science and either going into, you know, just focusing on science to the early modern era or focusing on collecting all of the classical era stars. The Greeks set you up to do that very well. And that is why I think they're so strong, because at the end of the day, fame is what matters the most, right? That's how you win. And having a lot of fame early on in the game is going to stress everyone out. It's going to have, I mean, you might get declared war on, but you have superior technology. If you decide to go blast through straight to the medieval, all to early modern, you're already going to have gunpowder units, right? The only thing you need to do to make this strategy work is have a strong defense, and you got hoplites, right? War summons early, so you can put out your crossbowmen and pikemen early. You can create great swordsmen really early if you have that source of iron, so that they can get upgraded straight into arquebusiers or musketeers if you want to go that route. So you have a lot of options for defense to keep yourself safe. I just think it's really good. But that's it for this video. Don't sleep on the Greeks, man. They're pretty good. I like, specifically because they're in the classical era and their bonuses benefit you to make a strong pivot, you know, up to early modern, or stay in the classical era and get all the fame stars. Like I said at the beginning, I make a bunch of Humankind videos now. Apparently I'm just a Humankind channel. Hit the buttons if you haven't already. You know the ones. The dislike button specifically. Yeah, I'm Sid the Casual Gamer. I suck just as bad as you do at video games, and I will see you all in the next one.